Welcome to the Disney Wedding Podcast. This show is brought to you by Carrie Hayward's Fairy Tale Weddings Guide, the only guidebook and bridal organizer tailored exclusively to Disney's fairy tale weddings at Walt Disney World. I'm Carrie Hayward, and each week I feature Disney wedding updates, money-saving tips, and interviews with wedding vendors and real Disney couples. I also cover honeymoons, anniversaries, and engagements at the Disney parks and resorts. Join me now as the Disney Wedding Podcast celebrates romance at Disney destinations. Today on the Disney Wedding Podcast, I am speaking with Disney bride Adrienne Buzzetta about her wedding at the Wedding Pavilion with a reception at the Grand Floridian Ballroom in Salon 6 and a dessert party at the French Island in EPCOT. I thought you guys would be interested to hear how she chose these locations and how she planned everything and how it all turned out. So welcome, Adrienne.
Hi, Carrie. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for being on the show today. I would love to start at the very beginning and find out how you guys decided that you wanted to have your wedding at Disney.
Yeah, so I think absolutely no one on earth was surprised when we decided to have a Disney wedding. My husband Mike and I are very much known as the Disney people in all of our circles. But the story of how we really decided began with me very long ago when I actually read your wedding trip report back on the message boards in, I think, 2008. So I was a teenager at the time, and I was obsessed with Disney and Disney weddings from then. And I think I kind of had the seed planted and solidified that I would have a Disney wedding one day. And then I ended up meeting Mike, who himself loves Disney. So the universe really rewarded me with that one. He's actually a cast member as well. And that kind of just how we came upon it. There was no other choice. We never even entertained having a local wedding up here in New York or New Jersey. It was Disney for us all the way.
That's awesome. I love that.
Yeah.
So then how did your friends and family react when they found out where the wedding was going to be?
No one was shocked. I think everyone expected it. Everyone who had known me, even before Mike entered the picture, kind of always knew that that was what I wanted. And then when I met him, like I said, and is possibly the only person I know who's a bigger Disney fan than me, even though I don't like to let him take that one. Everyone kind of knew. It kind of just worked out that we would have it that way.
How many guests did you invite and how many were able to make the trip?
So we invited about 150 to 160 guests, I would say, keeping in mind that most people would be traveling from the New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania area. And we really kind of thought that we wouldn't get a huge number. We thought maybe we'd have about 50% of people say yes. So we were expecting around 80, and that was the number that we had kept giving Disney over and over again. And then it turned out that a lot of people wanted to come and were able to make the trip. So we ended up, I think, with 111 guests in the end. We had guests from 8 different states that were able to make the trip.
Oh, that's awesome. Did you set up a room block for your guests?
We did. So this was something that we knew we wanted to do, and we weren't really positive how we wanted to go about doing the different resorts. We at first thought we would do a value, a moderate, and a deluxe to give everybody an option. And then as we looked into it, what we decided to ultimately do was choose one resort. So we chose Coronado Springs. And to give guests some variety, we did rooms in Grand Casino Tower and then rooms in the outer buildings. And the reason that we decided to do that was because we go to Disney a lot. We're there very often, and we're very big into staying at the boardwalk and the beach club and doing the deluxe resorts. But we felt like this was the only time on earth that we'd ever be able to have 100 of our guests with us at a Disney hotel. And so we really wanted to give a price point that was friendly to everyone. So people had a choice of, again, staying in the outer buildings that were more affordable or staying in the towers. We felt like there was something for everyone. We even had one guest say concierge. And it was really, honestly, one of the best decisions that we made, because every night we got back to our hotel and we would run into our aunt, our friends from college, our friends from the neighborhood. So I really feel like that was one of the best decisions we made in the process, was choosing one resort.
That's a great idea. Now, how did you choose the day of the week and time of day for your event?
So we knew that we wanted to do a weekend because, as I said, everyone was largely coming down from the Northeast And we wanted to make it so they wouldn't have to take any days off of work if they didn't want to. But if they wanted to, we figured at least they could take one day off. So we decided that we'd do a Friday for our welcome party, a Saturday evening for our wedding. And then on Sunday, what we decided to do was we had a kind of impromptu meet in EPCOT. Anyone who had a park ticket come and say hi to us and have a drink or some food around the world. So we essentially planned it so that everybody could be at least at the welcome party and the wedding day and not need to take a day off of work. And we felt like that was kind of in the best interest of our guests. And we were really looking out for people who we knew would be spending money to travel. Didn't want to force anyone to have to take time off of work.
That's a great idea. How did you choose your ceremony and reception venues?
So I knew I wanted the Wedding Pavilion. That was kind of the one non-negotiable for me in terms of locations. We knew we wanted some sort of traditional feel for our reception. We were between the American Adventure Rotunda and the ballrooms. We felt like both kind of had a more traditional feel that we were going for. And ultimately, we decided to go with the ballrooms because of the ability to use outside vendors. And we also felt like if we were doing the Wedding Pavilion and Grand Floridian, it kind of gave the Magic Kingdom feel. We knew we'd want our dessert party at EPCOT, so it gave an EPCOT kind of feel. And our welcome party was at Fantasmic in Hollywood Studios, so it gave guests access to Hollywood Studios as well. So we felt like that kind of incorporated the three parks that we love the most.
That's a great idea. Now, can you talk a little bit about the outside vendors you chose and how you found them?
Absolutely. So I used quite a few outside vendors. I used Longwood Events for draping and for our dance floor. They were really wonderful. I found them as a recommendation from Catherine Martell, who I used as my day of coordinator. And I cannot say enough about Catherine. I actually found out about her originally through Diz Brides and through the podcast. So very, very happy that we were able to connect. And she saved my day in many ways, which I'm sure I'll get to in a bit. I used Polk Bros for videography, found them through other Diz Brides as well, through videos that were posted or guests that were on the podcast, and just really liked their work and their style. I used The Roots, of course. So Nate and Jenzy were probably chosen before my groom even was. And they were kind of like celebrities in my mind. So the first time I met Nate, I felt like I was meeting I always tell him, I'm like, it was like meeting a celebrity because I had been following him and Jenzy, of course, since like 2008 when I first read about your wedding. So they were a very easy choice and just such wonderful people and so talented. I cannot tell you the compliments I've gotten on my wedding photos. Their work is it's just so stunning. So glad that we went with them. We used Dash of Class Platinum as our DJ. So we went with an outside DJ. This was something that my husband had kind of looked into, and he took the lead on this. And the reason that we went with Dash of Class was that they're an affiliate of a DJ company up here in New York and New Jersey that many of our friends have used and that we've really enjoyed at weddings. So once we found out that they had an affiliate down in Orlando, it was kind of a no-brainer for us. But what really made us decide that we wanted to do that was they also included all uplighting for us and a photo booth in our package. So it ended up being a really financially smart decision as well. And then we used Rev Kev for our officiant. And we used Fifth and Eighth Beauty for hair and makeup, and Beauty by Cabrina for my makeup. And she was flown down from New York. She's a personal friend and just an incredible artist. So we had her come down as well.
How did you guys choose Rev Kev for your officiant?
So this was another easy choice for me. Just coming off of all of the research that I'd done, I felt like he was so genuine and just had the vibe that we wanted. We actually were married legally about 2 weeks before we came down because we wanted it to be done in the Catholic Church. So we weren't necessarily looking for a super religious ceremony for our Disney wedding, but was kind of important to us to have some elements of that. And Rev Kev was able to give us a really heartfelt wedding ceremony that also had some elements of religion in it as well. And ultimately just felt like he was warm and kind and kind of just had that overall warmth that we wanted from somebody that was marrying us.
That's fantastic. Now, you talked about the DJ. Did you add any other kind of entertainment to the ceremony or the reception?
We did. So I think this was probably, besides the food, having entertainment and just prioritizing guest experience was number one for us throughout the process. We really wanted to show appreciation for people coming, and we really wanted to make it an experience for them. So this was something that we really put at the top of our list. So we had Mickey and Minnie in their bridal outfits come, and they were a huge hit. Everybody says it, but until you actually experience it, you don't really understand the excitement of a room full of predominantly adults when they see Mickey and Minnie walk in. It was so cool, and something I'll never forget when they announced them. So such a good decision having them. We had a photo booth, as I had mentioned, and that was really fun, gave people something to kind of do during the reception. We had Cinderella's carriage, which was another thing that I was not cutting for anything. I had to have that, and it was honestly one of the most special moments of the day, getting to ride in it with my husband, but then also on the way to our ceremony with my parents. It was something that I think even when they talk about the wedding day, it's something they're always mentioning. So it was really special to have that. We did a ride mix-in on Soarin' after our dessert party, which was another awesome, awesome surprise. We tried to keep that from our guests so that it would be kind of a little bit of a surprise at the end of the night. So once we wrapped up our dessert party, we told them we had one more thing in store, and we didn't really tell them where we were going. We just kind of started following the guide, all 100 plus of us, and walked all the way over to Soarin'. And by the time we got there, everybody was so hyped up, and by the time we sat in the ride, everyone was chanting our names, and it was just such a special moment. And I'm glad we chose Soarin' because kind of similar to what I was saying with choosing one hotel, everybody got to ride together. So I think a couple of folks chose not to ride, and then some of my friends had little ones, so had to sit the ride out. So by the time we actually got on the ride, we fit perfectly in terms of numbers. So we all got to ride on the same exact ride. So it was really cool to get to share that together. Again, a once in a lifetime opportunity. We'll never, ever ride an attraction with like all of my family and friends like that. We also, I don't know if this counts as entertainment. Obviously, we had the DJ, but we ordered foam glow sticks, which were a huge hit. So kind of like the light up batons. Yeah, I think that was kind of it.
Now, do you have any menu items from any of your events or cake flavors that you would recommend?
Definitely. So we decided to do Disney foods that we really loved for our welcome party. And I think even more so than the wedding day, all of the feedback that I've gotten from everybody is how much they loved the welcome party food, which is just so funny. So what we decided to do was we didn't serve a full meal since we used the large patio at Fantasmic, and it's not a seated event. We did foods that you normally eat at Disney. Again, we wanted our wedding to feel like a reflection of us and the reasons why we love coming to Disney. And that, of course, includes the food. So we had Mickey chicken and waffles with chicken inside of them, kind of like the ones at Rick's Cafe at Coronado. And we had maple syrup to dip them in. And that was a huge hit. I think people loved eating a Mickey waffle and then biting into it and realizing it was actually chicken in it. We did Mickey pretzels with cheese. We did a Pop-Tart inspired by the ones at Woody's. So we had a chocolate hazelnut one because we love Woody's lunchbox. We also did a sliders bar, which everybody raved about. We did pre-popped popcorn, Mickey bars. So really just that theme park food. And I think that was a hit. Everything from that party I would recommend doing. Just really special and not things that you see at a normal wedding. From the actual wedding day, I think the standout hit was, of course, the cheeseburger egg rolls, which I actually think were more delicious on my wedding day than they ever were. I don't know if it was just that I was starving, but that's something that I look back on and as one of the most delicious things I ate that weekend. We also had a Le Cellier inspired filet that was absolutely delicious. And our cake flavors, I'd recommend all of them. We had 3 different ones because we had a 3-tiered cake. So we did funfetti with buttercream frosting. We did chocolate cake with peanut butter cup frosting. And then the standout hit, which I think is a bit of a sleeper hit, but so good. We did almond cake with raspberry jam, which was kind of inspired by like a 7-layer cookie that we love up here in New York and New Jersey. So that almond and raspberry mix, I think it was such a hit. Everybody loved it. That one, I think, ran out pretty quick because it was the smallest tier. So I may have switched them around and done a larger almond cake and maybe a smaller funfetti.
Got it. Okay. For the Fantasmic welcome party, can you tell my listeners a little bit more about that? I know sometimes people are leery of it because Fantasmic gets canceled for weather more often, and sometimes they change the time on you at the last second. Can you just tell my listeners more about how that worked?
So actually, both of those things happened. We found out that the time was moved up about a week before. Luckily, one of my invitation makers had recommended putting really early start times on everything. And so we were kind of covered by that. So we had told people to show up earlier than they really needed to originally, but then it ended up being the time that everyone actually needed to arrive. So no edits were needed there. We didn't need to contact people about a new time. We were kind of able to make it work. The weather was probably my biggest stress of the weekend. It looked like rain all day originally in the forecast up until that day. And then that day, I would say around noontime, started to clear up, looked clear for the rest of the day. So we were like, okay, we're in the clear, we're good. We hadn't heard about being moved into an indoor location. And then around the time we were about to get out of the car to get there, it started to rain really heavily. At this point, Disney had already called me to say that the weather looked okay. They were set up and we would go ahead with having it outside. But the rain decided to come anyway after this all happened. So absolutely nobody's fault, just a surprise sprinkle that lasted about an hour. So the rain ended up being okay in the end because it kind of gave everyone a full Disney experience. We kept joking, looking around. Disney had provided ponchos for everyone, which was wonderful. But to look around at all of our guests in their nice clothing, wearing a poncho, sitting and eating Mickey-shaped foods, watching Fantasmic, we were like, we've converted everyone into Disney fans. So we kind of made a joke out of it. And the pictures are hilarious. So Nate also photographed the welcome party. And we've got these photos of everybody just, again, sitting there in their ponchos, eating these snacks. And it's cool to look back on it now. Our backup location would have been Pizza Rizzo, though.
Oh, yeah, the worst.
I requested to not have it, but it would have been. I think my request was not going to be met, they said.
I mean, there's basically the only other place you could go would be Disney Junior, and then they charge you extra for lighting or something, so.
Oh, I didn't know that. Well, I honestly was praying to keep it outside, even if it did drizzle. I would have rather have it the way that it was, where people got wet for a few minutes or, a little while. By the time the show started, it did sort of clear up.
Oh, that's great. Okay, good. Now, can you give my listeners a timeline of how the wedding day ran?
Sure. So hair and makeup started at 5 a.m., which was super early, a lot earlier than I expected. And so everybody came to my room. We had one of the suites at Grandestino Tower, which I highly recommend. I don't know if enough people know about it, but it's really such a spacious room and everybody was able to fit comfortably to get ready. So we spent the whole morning getting ready. There were about 10 of us in my room who had hair and makeup done. So that took quite a while. Nate and Jenzy and Poke Bros arrived around 9:45, and they started with my husband doing his photos of him and his best man and all of the shots that they needed to get. And then they came up to me to take photos of my bridesmaids and I, my mom and I, my aunt and I, getting ready photos, all of the accessories and detail pictures. And we left for the Grand Floridian around 11:45. So we had decided that we wanted to do a first look and then do our portraits, a lot of our pictures anyway, before the ceremony. And that was really because we wanted to enjoy as much time as we could with our friends and family. So we did our first look around 12:15. We did that on the staircase at the Grand Floridian, which was one of those things that I was very, very set on. The stairs at the Grand Floridian are very significant to me and just a place in Disney that means a lot to me. And so it kind of had to be in that spot. And it turned out to be one of the best moments of the day. We then took photos with our families at around 1:30 and finished portraits around 2, and then headed over in the coach for the ceremony at 2:30. We had our staged exit after the ceremony. So we did the bubbles and the coach exit. and then took extended family photos. So that was around, I would say 3:10 to 3:20, about, probably a little longer because I have a pretty large family. But we did all the aunts and uncles, cousins photos at the Wedding Pavilion. After that, we headed over to cocktail hour, which started at 3:30, and that was at Whitehall patio. And then Mike and I decided that we would kind of skip the cocktail hour and just sit privately and enjoy the food and each other's company for a little bit. And I'm really glad I did that. Looking back, I think it was one of the most special moments of the day. We thought at first we'd want to be in cocktail hour with everyone, but we really needed that 20, 30 minutes to kind of sit, unwind, take it all in. So I was really glad we decided to do that. And then our reception started at 4:30. We had dinner, we did some dancing, guests enjoyed the photo booth. Mickey and Minnie then arrived around 6:45. We had them for a while. Mike and I both did an outfit change before our dessert party. So around 7:15, I started heading to get changed into my second dress. Reception ended shortly after, around 7:30. We got on 2 buses and a van. All of us packed up and headed over to EPCOT. Got dropped off at our dessert party around 8. Fireworks were at 9. And then after fireworks ended, hung out for a couple of minutes and then headed right over to Soarin' to do the ride vixen. And then we went back to Grandestino, and that was a wrap on the day. It was a really long day, but it was awesome.
Now, you talked about guest experience being super important to you guys. Were there any other aspects that you focused your attention or your budget on?
Yeah, so food was a huge one for us. I think, and I know I've heard many other brides say this, the cocktail hours up here are very excessive. And that's kind of what we were afraid our guests would be used to, is just having tons and tons of food to the point where it's almost wasteful. So we really wanted to provide enough food, but we also wanted to do it in a way that felt authentic to us and to the experience at Disney. So it really was striking the balance between having enough food that everybody had variety and felt familiar in some ways, but also not going overboard because there were so many other things going on besides the food. But we did end up, I think, probably doing more food than we even needed to. We had lots of food, like I talked about at the welcome party, but then the day of, we did, I think, 6 appetizers at our cocktail hour. We did some signature cocktails. We had one for me, one for Mike, and one for our dog, Leo, who obviously couldn't make the trip down to Disney, but is a huge part of our lives. So we tried to incorporate him anywhere we could. And actually, Rev Kev had put Leo in his sermon to us as well, which was really, really cool. So we like to think our little guy had his moment or two here and there. And yeah, the food, like I said, was just a really important thing. So we did a sit-down meal because that is kind of more traditional for the weddings that we're used to. We did a pretty large spread of desserts at the dessert party. We really wanted people to feel, again, that balance between having a kind of familiar experience, but just in a different way.
Got it. And then were there aspects that were less important where you saved your money or just your effort?
Absolutely. So I think for me, I focused kind of very little on floral and decor. For my events outside of my actual reception, I had basically no decor. So for Fantasmic at the patios, I had nothing. For a dessert party at EPCOT, I didn't add anything. The only areas where I really added floral and decor were for our ceremony and our reception. And even at that, it was, I would say, pretty minimal. I did have some upgraded linens. I wanted the sequin linens, but I decided to only do those on the sweetheart table and the cake table, so I cut back that way. We did do pretty significant centerpieces for florals, but we rotated them, which is a tip that I think is really, really helpful. So we wanted the height and the dimension, but we didn't want to have a large centerpiece on every single table because we did have 12 tables. So we decided to do half and half. So we had one smaller one and then one larger one on every other table, which really helped me to cut back and save some money there. So I really just kind of made it so I prioritized the things that were really important to me, such as, again, like the dance floor. I didn't want the wooden dance floor. I wanted the upgraded one that I got from Longwood. I wanted draping, but I only did one wall. kind of prioritized those things and then cut back from there.
Got it. So out of all of this, what ended up being your favorite memory of your wedding day?
This is a hard one, but I think my first look. The first look, I knew I wanted it at the Grand Floridian on those stairs. And we would always joke every trip before, like, oh, those are my stairs. And that's where our first look is going to be. So now to actually have that moment have happened was just really, really special. And I know like Mike and I will always go back there and just look at it with such fond memories. And it was really one of the most beautiful, touching moments of the day. Another moment, though, I think I'll never forget was the night of the welcome party. So all of our guests got there, and there were, again, about 100 people, and Mike and I were the last to arrive, so we could make sort of an entrance. And as we walked up to the flagpole outside of Hollywood Studios, everybody broke into cheers and applause. And this was the first time I was seeing probably 90% of our guests since it was the welcome party. So outside of our immediate family, who we had been with earlier in the week, this was the first time I was seeing people who had traveled from all over. So that moment walking up to that, even though it was raining, I didn't even feel the rain. Just getting to be met with the applause of so many people that I loved that showed up for us was absolutely incredible. And I remember just saying to Mike that day, and then again at our wedding day, just to look around, because we're in the place that we love the most, that honestly is the most meaningful place on earth to us. Like, we were engaged on the Fantasy. We come to Disney constantly. It's our happy place. But to look around and to see so many people that we love and cared for that made that trip for us was unforgettable.
That's wonderful. Now, did anything go wrong or just not turn out like you expected?
So I had quite a snafu with my dress. I had gone for about 3 or 4 fittings before leaving. And I guess I hadn't really walked around long enough in it to notice that it was catching on the bottom of my shoe. Didn't realize it until I showed up to the Grand Floridian for photos. And I was at the point where, I had a very large ball gown, but it was getting to the point where even with it being a large ball gown, I couldn't walk without fear of tripping. So this is where Gen Z and Catherine really jumped in and saved my day, because they were able to cut a piece of the tulle off, which both of them were very concerned to do, but I know. Catherine looked at me at one point and she's like, I can't believe I'm taking scissors to a wedding dress. But it had to be done because I couldn't walk. I would have fallen down. There was no doubt about it. I had many, many layers of tulle. Like, I can't even count how many layers of tulle were in my dress. So what they did was they figured out which layers of tulle were the ones making me trip, and they cut them so that when I took my steps, I was not catching on the tulle. So definitely a memory that I will remember forever was cutting my wedding dress an hour before my ceremony. So that wasn't quite perfect. The only other thing really was the weather the night of Fantasmic, as I had mentioned, but we made the best of it. My wedding day itself was sunny and beautiful, so I feel like I couldn't have asked for anything more. And you can't control the weather.
Right. So then, was there anything besides the weather that you were stressed out about, or you were thinking was going to be a big deal and then it turned out not to be?
Couple of things. So number one, which this sounds very silly, but I had a lot of gold in my wedding, and I didn't really do a theme, but I tend to just lean more towards gold and wanted more gold elements in my wedding. And so the silverware was something that I spent way too much time thinking about before the wedding. I ultimately decided not to upgrade to the gold silverware just to save some money. And honestly, looking back, I don't even remember what the silverware looked like, nor do I think anyone else did. So that was one of those things that I think I had just really overemphasized and that no one noticed. So I'm glad that I saved money there. The other thing was getting my dress there. So if you've seen my dress, you know it was quite large, and we had to get it down from New Jersey to Orlando. And it was quite a feat. We ended up purchasing a seat for the dress, but even so, it was so heavy to carry through the airport. And I was so worried about getting it there, having to put it through security, having to carry it, having to get it everywhere safely. But in the end, it really was fine. And this was another thing similar to the rain, where I think it kind of added humor to the day and to the week, because everybody got a kick out of seeing this enormous dress sitting on the seat on the airplane, and everybody knew we were getting married. So by the time we landed in Orlando, the pilot made an announcement congratulating us. So it was one of those things. I stressed about it a ton, and I worried, and I really thought about just canceling the flight and driving down with it. But in the end, I'm kind of glad that we did it the way that we did.
Now, is there anything you would have done differently knowing what you know now?
Honestly, no. I had the very best day, the best weekend, the best week. Disney went above and beyond for us. My planner, I cannot say enough about her. She was incredibly responsive. I mean, we would email and within an hour have responses about everything that we had questions on. I was so happy with my vendors. I really felt like the day was everything I dreamed of, and there wasn't anything that I'd do differently.
Do you have any other tips or advice for future Disney couples?
Yeah, I think going into it, you can get a lot of different opinions, and it's wonderful to have all of these resources out there, but sometimes you can kind of overload yourself with all of the information that's out there. And I tended to find, especially as we got closer, the more information I was consuming and the more feedback and opinions I was consuming, the more stressed I felt. My advice really is to stay true to yourself and stick to what you really want in your heart, and try to drown out the noise. There will be a lot of opinions, but at the end of the day, it really matters what you and your partner want for your day. And everything that we did that felt genuine to us was the stuff that I'm looking back on now with just the most joy, like sticking to wanting the carriage and keeping that as a non-negotiable when maybe other people would have suggested cutting it. I think that was important to us. And if you stick to the things that are important to you, your day will be a success.
That's great advice. Well, Adrienne, I think you've offered a lot of great tips and advice for anyone who's interested in getting married or having a vow renewal at Walt Disney World, and I appreciate your taking the time.
Thank you so much, Carrie.
That's our show for today. I'm your host, Carrie Hayward, inviting you to join me again next week for another episode of the Disney Wedding Podcast. Past shows and tons of photos for each episode are available on my website, DisneyWeddingPodcast.com, or listen in your favorite podcast app. And for instant answers to all your Walt Disney World wedding questions, check out Carrie Hayward's Fairy Tale Weddings Guide, available as an interactive ebook with continual free updates at fairytaleweddingsguide.com.